Hello, how are you doing today? I'm doing pretty well myself. I made myself some coffee. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. Today it's not very nice outside. In my neighborhood, they are doing construction and there is dust everywhere. And it's been like this the past 2 or 3 weeks. I honestly don't know what they're doing construction on, but the street lights are not working and there's dust everywhere. You're drinking beer. What time is it there? I guess in Chile it's 11, so it's not too early. It's like a breakfast beer, but okay, I asked people on my story if they had specific questions that they wanted me to go over in the live today. The questions that people sent me were very unrelated to one another. So I thought today is kind of like a miscellaneous day, a mixed day with different topics. Maybe that's a good one to start with. How do you order food or a coffee? That could be our first question today. How do you order food or a coffee? I guess it depends. If you're a person that does not like coffee, you can order a juice or a tea or something else. Recently, I had to order something and it was so embarrassing. You had to order it in English? What would be the best way to order a coffee in English? Does anyone here have experience doing that? May I have is very polite. Yeah, may I have a medium coffee? Could I get a cup of tea, please? Yeah, could I get is also a good way to order. G'day, that's very Australian. G'day, can I get a small oat milk cap with 1 sugar, please? Okay, that's a good one. I'd like to take a coffee, or I'll take a coffee. Yeah, I feel like in that case, when you're saying take, I'll sounds better. I'll take a coffee. I'll have. Instead of I'd like to take a coffee, if you say I'd like, it's better to just say I'd like a coffee. So I would say I'd like a coffee or I'll take a coffee. Both of those would be good. Could you get me a cup of coffee? Yeah, that would make more sense maybe if you're sitting at a table in a restaurant. Like if you're sitting at a table in a cafe, then the waiter comes to you and you say, "Oh, could you get me a cup of coffee?" If you're at the bar, maybe it's better, yeah, can I get a cup of coffee? Could you please give me I would say a cup of coffee, or if you want a latte, just say I want a latte. So that would be the better option. Can I get a latte? Or can I get a cup of coffee? Can I order? It wouldn't be so common. So if you say, can I order a cup of coffee? That would be better, not if you are actually ordering. It would be better if you go to a restaurant and imagine the restaurant is like just opening. So you don't know, is it possible? Can I order something? Can I order a cup of coffee? And they say, yeah, sure. What do you want? Can I get a black coffee? So if you include the word order, it doesn't really sound like you are ordering the coffee now. You just want to know if it's okay that you can order the coffee. Obviously, in the context, if the person is, I don't know, able to use context clues, they'll probably understand what you want to say. But I think that would be better if you're not sure if you should be ordering or not. Like, oh, I don't know if you're serving coffee. Can I order a coffee? Okay, yeah, I think the best ways would be, can I get, can I have, I'll take this. Yeah, or even, I mean, you can hear people not say anything. They'll be like, a large mocha, please. May I order or can I order? Technically, so you'll hear people say that may is more correct than can because can is like ability and may is like permission. But I don't think that that is modern. Like when I was younger, when I was in school, if I asked to go to the bathroom, there were a couple teachers that would say, if you say, can I go to the bathroom? They would say, I know you can go to the bathroom. It's may I go to the bathroom. But nowadays, may and can is used in the same way. And I would say can is a lot more common. So that is a little bit, may sounds more polite, but because of usage, I would say that can is not incorrect because that's kind of a rule that used to exist, but now people use can in the same way. In German, we would never ask a question when we're ordering something. Yeah, we usually will say, "Can I get?" I think maybe if you say it with like, "Can I get a coffee?" It sounds very casual. It's not like so polite. If you say like, "May I please have?" That sounds like you're ordering from the Queen of England. But like, if you're a very formal person, go for it. But I think most people will say, "I'd like this. Can I get this? I'll take this. I'll have." Heard it would be restroom than bathroom. Yeah, technically they say that it would be restroom if it's like a public restroom as opposed to bathroom, which is in your house. But when I go to a restaurant, I say, "Where's the bathroom?" Like, I think a lot of native speakers use them interchangeably, but we would not use restroom in someone's house. That would sound very formal. But I personally use bathroom for both. Restroom is technically more when you're in like a public place. Yeah, I would say here's the thing. Like growing up, whenever like everyone used the word bathroom and not restroom. So sometimes we have these rules of like this is this and this is that. But when I was growing up, the teachers would say, "Oh, there's a mess in the girls' bathroom," or like I would say that that's kind of in practice, people use them interchangeably. So I wouldn't really worry about it because, yeah, like in real life, people use bathroom a lot to refer to the restroom. Would you like a strong flavor or a fruit aromatic coffee? Yeah, I would have a fruity aromatic coffee. Does anyone here have an idea for what type of coffee you like? We often talk about with drinks, you can have notes of something. So I should get my coffee, but you can have like notes of cacao, notes of, I don't know, what do they have notes of in the coffee? Like notes of nectarine. I'll take a large coffee with oat milk. I love oat milk in coffee. Cappuccino or piccolo. Okay, what is a piccolo? I don't know. Why to say I want is regarded as impolite. I think that it's just kind of like, I want a coffee. Yeah, I think it's not the common one that I would use, I want. It sounds almost like, I don't mean any offense by this. I'm just saying like my honest perception, right? I don't mean any offense if you say I want, or in different languages it's different. But if you ask a child, like a child will say like, I want that, and is like very unfiltered and just is like, this is what I want that. And so I think maybe it kind of has a tone of that if you just use I want. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but that's kind of how I feel. It feels really direct and you're telling me your desire, but you're not, yeah, but you're not talking about like the transaction as much. I want this, please. I would just not use if possible. So if you guys use I want, people will understand you. So if you're panicked and you don't remember how to order, that's fine. But I would, if you're able to choose in the moment, I would not use I want because it's not common to use related to ordering food. If you're talking to your friends and they're like, "Okay, what are we going to do for dinner?" You can say, "Ooh, I want sushi. I want this. Like, this is my desire." Yeah, it sounds kind of demanding. And then if you're actually in the transaction, like in the restaurant, I would say more. But at the same time, if you say I'll take or I'll have, it doesn't sound impolite. It just sounds like that's what you want, but more, I don't know, more sophisticated, more unfiltered, more filtered. Like, yeah, maybe a linguist needs to analyze the connotation of that. What kind of processing extract of your coffee? French press. Okay, I feel like you have a lot of coffee knowledge. And German adults also would never order something with true, yeah, it would sound more childish. Okay, it's a small coffee, baby chino. Maybe I know that yeah, that's the thing. I know in different languages it's okay to say I want. So I'm explaining why in English it sounds a little bit not good, but also I'm sure there are things we say in English that would sound not good in your respective languages. Yeah, for the payment process, I guess it depends. Are the cafes that you guys go to more sit-down cafes, or you go up to the counter to order? What kind of cafes are you going to? The counter is like it's not a table, but it's the place where when you go to the register, the person is standing behind a desk, kind of. That is the counter. So if you can sit at the table to order, or if you need to go to the person that's working there, you go to the counter. Near my house, they sell puppuccinos. Are they for dogs to drink? Do you think at the age of 37, we still have a chance to talk like natives? I think that you can definitely get really fluent in English. I think in terms of if you mean accent and everything like that, those are things that really depend on the person. But in terms of speaking really good English, it's definitely possible. I think sometimes people have the idea kids are the best ones at learning English and adults can't learn as well. That's not completely true. So kids are really good at learning languages, but there are some things that you can do as an adult in order to be better. So one reason kids are so good at learning languages is they have a lot of free time. A lot of adults are working and doing different things, so they really don't dedicate the necessary time that they need to learn a language. So that's one important thing. Literally the time that kids spend with free time and being able to practice different things. That's why in some cases they're much better learners, because they're not so stressed and stressed like adults are. Another thing is that kids are less scared of making mistakes, so they'll just imitate you or really try different things. And a lot of adults limit ourselves and are too scared to do that. So I think if you have this curious mindset that kids have, you can still learn very effectively. So yeah, it's not like kids are 100%, like everything that they do is completely natural only to children. There are some strategies that kids do that over time as adults, when we get fixed in our worldview, we kind of lose. It's definitely still possible. I've taught people much older than 37. I do think shadowing is a great way to practice English. Yes. It helps you practice saying words that you wouldn't normally say. It helps you with your rhythm. It helps you with your speaking. I think it's a great strategy. Also with your listening. They are just milk froth. That's so funny. No, it's not cajero. So counter is like la mesa que usa el cajero is the counter. So we say like order at the counter. It's like the desk that they use. You could say the cashier or the cash register. That would be like the cajero. But the desk thing that they use is the counter. In your kitchen, all of you in your kitchen have a counter. It's the place where you can cut vegetables or, like next to your sink. That is your kitchen counter. Okay. Yeah. And so related to paying, if you have an idea, you can write it as well. If you're going to pay for coffee in the US, it's not common that they ask you cash or card. A lot of the time when you're practicing English with role plays, they have cash or card, credit or debit. But in my experience in the US, those are not common questions. Usually they just say, can I get anything else for you? Or is that all? So they'll say some variation of that, like, can I get anything else for you? Or is that all? And then you can say, no, that's all. Thank you. And then they'll say, okay, that will be $9. I don't know. And then you just have to show that you're paying with card, like start to pay. You could say, I'm paying with card, but the person might just be like, okay, because it's not necessary to say what you're paying with. Yeah. How come I 100% understand you, but for some natives, it's hard to catch what they say in terms of speaking fast? I would say something that I do in the classes that people are not paying attention to when they're speaking really quickly is I try to not use as much connected speech. And so probably what you're hearing when you're not able to fully understand people is that instead of saying, what would you say if you paid for a coffee? They're like, what would you say if you paid for a coffee? And that, I mean, to be honest, when I'm talking to my family and I'm not paying attention to other people understanding me because they are so used to talking to me that like I don't need to pay attention to how I sound, I also can speak a bit more like that. So yeah, that's why. It's because teachers, we make an effort. There are different levels to this, but a lot of teachers try to reduce how unclear we sound, so that makes us easier to understand. In Germany, you would definitely tell the person in which way you'll pay. Yeah, in English, it's not necessary to do that. Usually, it's pretty normal to tap and go these days. Yeah. So usually the reason is because they put in the system how much it was, and there's always a card reader next to the machine. Maybe if you're paying in cash specifically, because that's not common, you'll have to just give it to the person. But any sort of card that you have, the number will appear on a screen and you just have to kind of do it yourself. So we don't have so many questions at checkout in English speaking countries. You really have, is there anything else I can get for you? And then, no, nothing else. This is your total. Okay, pay. If you're sitting at a restaurant, you might say, hey, can I get the check or can I get the bill? And then they'll bring it over to you and then you can pay. And you don't need to tell them, for example, in Chile, they say, do you want to include the tip? But in the US, you don't need to tell them. You write the tip yourself. So you don't need to interact as much. Yeah, in general, with the paying for things, I feel that we don't interact as much compared to other countries. This is a good question. What's the best practice to understand that way of talking fast or like very native kind of style that using words I've never heard? So recently I went to a workshop where we were taught about how to teach this sort of thing, like teaching really difficult to understand audio. And one of the strategies that I thought was really interesting that they told us was that when you're looking for content, interviews can be really good practice because if you're watching an interview like Miley Cyrus interviewed on Jimmy Kimmel, like these talk show interviews or podcast interviews, those are really great for English learners because they have moments where it's very clear, and then the moments where the famous person tells a story really fast. So you have kind of a nice combination of clear speech and also messy, fast speech. So interviews can be a really great way to get used to that way of speaking. Another thing is there have been studies done that show students that explicitly practice connected speech themselves are better able to hear it and identify it. So look for videos about connected speech or reduced speech reductions. Wanna, gonna, what'ja, how'ja. Look for videos. There are a lot on YouTube and practice listening to these specific reductions, and then you'll be able to identify them more when people are using them. It's important to remember that when you listen to someone and they say like, how'd you do that? I am hearing the same thing as you, but because I have a lot of practice identifying, how'd you do that? Like I'm better at guessing. Okay, I think this word is this. I think this word is that. So it's not like one day you're going to magically hear everything perfectly clearly and separated. It's more that you need to practice identifying how sounds are used and also identifying, getting better with the context of, okay, normally in this situation, if the person says, what'ja, how'ja, it's a question. And normally they're going to be talking in the past, like getting better at the guessing part of it. So that's also going to help you. Do you think every English teacher should before learn at least one language. Definitely. I think every language teacher should learn a language because you might give people advice. Yeah, I think you learn things while you're learning languages that you can actually teach your students that are very practical. So I definitely think every language teacher should learn at least another language for sure. What's your take on Starbucks? To me, it's just a ripoff. I agree. I ran out of coffee. There's a specific coffee roaster. They get their coffee from Brazil that I really like in Chile. And one day we ran out of coffee, my husband and I, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to get some from Starbucks. And it was more expensive, like the coffee beans, and it tasted like they burnt them on purpose in order for it to taste more, I don't know, like richer the flavor, but it just tasted burnt. So I'm not a fan of Starbucks coffee, actually. I asked on my story what topics you guys wanted to talk about, and I have a couple more. One person asked me, was it really hard for me to learn Spanish? And I would say that I think that because it was the first language that I got like proficiency in, because I took Latin classes when I was younger, and that was really interesting and helpful. And I could use the written language for tests when I was like 14. So it's been a while. But in terms of speaking proficiency, I think that Spanish was hard, not, I think because the language obviously has differences with English, but I also think on the other hand, it's because it was the first language that I learned how to speak. And whenever I get comments like, why is English so hard? I always think, I don't know if it's English specifically or if it's whenever you learn a language that's different from your native language and it's the second language that you're learning. So you have your native language and then your second language. I think that language is always going to be hard. So if you speak Spanish and you decide to learn Japanese or you decide to learn English, like it will always look hard because it's going to be a different way of thinking and you have to get used to not knowing things. And I think learning a second language helps you if you decide to learn another language also, because you get to know yourself as a language learner and you get over the fear of speaking. But it's funny, there are a lot of things where I now realize, like, so when you're learning Spanish as an English speaker, people tell you, work on your R sound, like they have the rolled R and other sounds. But people don't really tell you to work on your vowel sounds, e, I, o, u. And that part is way more important. And so there are a lot of things that I realize I wish that a teacher told me before, because that would have been really helpful for me, but I kind of learned it later on. Is that idea of obtaining an English accent impossible after a certain age? I wouldn't, I hesitate to say impossible. Honestly, I would have to see if there's research about that, like if there have been studies done about that. But yeah, I hesitate to say impossible for anything. I think it really depends on the person. Some people are really good at imitation and imitating accents, and other people are not, and other people could be, but they don't really care. Like they don't pay attention to that. So I think it also really depends on the person. Okay, someone else, I also got questions related to mixed conditionals. So I'm going to share this just in case you guys have any questions about it. I think this is type 1. Okay, again, like I said, this is kind of a miscellaneous English class, lots of random topics today. Okay, so mixed conditional type 1. If you know conditional sentences, you might know that we have the second conditional, which is something unreal happening in the present. And we have the third conditional, which is something unreal that didn't happen in the past, but I'm imagining it. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And the thing is, in the real world, we do not have only things that happen in the present or only things that happen in the past. We have a lot of things that are very complicated. There was a past situation that affected our present, or there was a present situation that affected us in the past. And so it's also important to know that we can mix the conditionals. So if we have a past condition that affected us in the present, and we want to imagine how the present would be different if the past had been different, we're going to have the situation in the past, but instead of would have, we're going to just use would. So if I had studied medicine, I would be a doctor now. So whenever you are talking about a past situation that affected you, you can say would have, also talking about the past, or would talking about the present. For example, maybe you can tell me, answering this question, if the pandemic hadn't happened, what would be different in your life now? So if the pandemic hadn't happened, what would be different in your life now is the question. We have, if you hadn't talked about that, people wouldn't have known. That would be a third conditional. If I hadn't talked about that in the past, people would not have known in the past. I can also talk about a present result. If I hadn't talked about that in the past, people wouldn't know today. So if you hadn't taken an English class as a child, you would not know the verb to be today, for example. So that is one type of mixed conditional. I think this is probably going to be the most common type of mixed conditional between the two, is when something in the past affects you today, because that's just a more common situation versus something in your present affecting your past. I'll show you that after, but tell me, if the pandemic hadn't happened, what would be different in your life today? This is a good example. If the pandemic hadn't happened, there would be more people alive today. True. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I wouldn't have a drawer full of masks. Perfect. And yes, the word is drawer, exactly. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I would be working a different job. Okay, you could say, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I would have been working a different job at that time, because you're also talking about the past. But if you're talking about the present, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I wouldn't be working in my current job. So that would be the mixed conditional. Past affecting the present. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I wouldn't appreciate the health and the really important things in life. That's a good one. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I would not have learned to use social media. Okay, I think that's true for a lot of people, social media or Zoom. If it hadn't happened, my deceased friends would be alive. Yeah, that's a good example. So this is a mixed conditional. Remember, you have two options. You can say, if this hadn't happened, I would have this now, or I would have done this in the past. So you can use would to talk about now, or would have to talk about the past. I think that's the best thing to remember, is that would have is like the past of would. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I would have to go to the office every day. Yes. The other type of, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I would still live in Chile. If the pandemic hadn't happened, we wouldn't have known about the option to work from home online. Yes, exactly. If Corona had never occurred. Yeah, and this is a word, I also got the question how to pronounce the word occurred. 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 It's almost like if I were saying curd. I don't know if any of you are Kurdish, but occurred. Curd. Occurred. Okay. Nice. We have different languages too. Okay, so that is what I would say the most common mixed conditional. This is the other mixed conditional. So the other mixed conditional is that the past would be different if something were different now. This one is specifically talking about how we use the present tense to talk about true facts or things that are always true about you. So, for example, if I were more confident, I would have applied for that job. So think of like a permanent thing about yourself and how that would have changed something in the past. So this one is a little bit more specific. I find that thinking about how a past action affected the present is going to be more common, the first type. But we can also think about how something true of your life, like I am from this country, I am a confident person, I am a happy person, I have 3 sisters, like something that is just a present fact about your life affected a past event. So that would be this one, and that's why it's a little bit more specific. If the pandemic hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to attend patients from abroad. Nice. If not for the pandemic, there would be more people on Earth. True. And I could say, like, if I were crazier, I would have gotten in more fights. I don't know. You can say, if a friend has a job opportunity now, if I were you, I would apply for the job. But if a friend had an opportunity in the past and they didn't take it, you can say, if I were you, I would have applied for the job. If I were you, I would have applied for the job. If I had known you weren't going to show up, I wouldn't have made dinner. Yeah, that's the third conditional. So if I were more like this, or if I spoke French fluently, I would have had a better time traveling to Paris. I don't know. If I had a brother, I would have gone with him to a baseball game. If I were more bold, I would have moved to another country. Nice. Remember the word bold is B-O-L-D. Bold. A person that is adventurous and makes, I don't know, maybe big decisions. If I were more bold. If I were bolder. If I were less shy, I would have nailed my English pronunciation by now. If I were more relaxed, I would have been in a better mood. Yes, like if I were a calmer person, I would have handled the situation with the customer better. This one is second conditional. If I were a billionaire, I would have more money. So that is the mixed conditionals. Someone asked me before, how can I improve my pronunciation? Yeah, there are different things. I would say one thing that people do a lot to improve their pronunciation is tongue twisters. So that kind of helps you work your mouth in a certain way, like red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry. I think also shadowing is a really good thing to do. Imitate exactly the way that other people talk. Something that's important to remember is when you're practicing your pronunciation, try to practice in a variety of ways. So instead of only practicing the word walked, 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 try to put different words before and after to pronounce it. Walked it, walked over, walked through. So variety is always going to be very important with practicing your pronunciation instead of just practicing like the same word over and over. Class on connected speech. Does anyone here know words that you use in connected speech? For example, we have lemme. This is let me. This is helpful. Okay, even if you're a person that's like, I do not want to use connected speech, I only want to pronounce everything separated and perfect. That's okay, but practicing connected speech is going to help you a lot with your listening. It's difficult to understand people if you don't practice connected speech and knowing the meaning of certain groups of words. Because if you read English, it's not how it sounds when you listen to someone speaking fast. So we have whatcha. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? So what are you? Whatcha. Wanna, gonna, gotta. Exactly. Can anyone make a sentence with multiple connected speech words and I can read it out loud? So like, I don't know if you wanna go, we gotta check. I don't know if you wanna go, we gotta check. It's, I don't know if you want to go, we have got to check. If I were a scientist, I would have invented a gadget where teacher can beat students online. Do you mean beat like hit a student? What context would you use this gadget? Linking. It's also something else that you can think about with this is when we have a T, it's very common that we don't fully pronounce the T. There's one thing, again, in the workshop I went to recently that we talked about was there was a topic that we talked about, which was the hiss effect, which is where you don't pronounce the T when it comes after an S. I just have one. I just have one. I just gotta go where I don't want to be. Yeah. Gotta go where I don't want to be. This is complicated. I would say there are some really good resources you can use to practice. One that I always recommend people is the Ben Franklin exercise from Rachel's English. She shows authentic, real speech and then analyzes it to show the type of reductions that she does. So certain categories of words that are linked. I've done a class about this actually before. I have a full class on YouTube and Spotify about this. Okay, so for example, one is, do you think about AI to practice speaking? I think that, to be honest, anything that you do to speak out loud is beneficial to your speaking. So a lot of people don't practice like actually using their voice to speak out loud. And if you have AI and you're able to talk to it and it will help you kind of think on your feet, like you have to respond to the question. I think that part is useful. So the aspect of needing to come up with your own phrases in the moment, because a lot of people struggle with that. So I think that if AI is your best tool to do that, that's helpful. Personally, I think languages are very human, so the best thing you can do is also just talk to humans, but the tools that you have available to you is more like an AI tool. I think that's way better than not practicing your speaking. So we have assimilation, which occurs in one sound when it causes a change to the neighboring sound. If you have two words in a row and you have a repeat sound, like red dye, for example, then you're going to pronounce this like it's all one word. Instead of saying red dye, you'll say red dye, red dye, red dye. So that's one way that we reduce words, right? And does anyone else have an example of this? A word where the last sound of one word is the first sound of the next word? Can you think of any other examples where we don't repeat the sound? Like phone number, for example. Instead of phone number, phone number, phone number. We are not repeating or putting like a strong space in between those two words because it has the same sound. So we're going to kind of blend it together. The first step, first step. This is a really good example. The first step, the first step. Also, an interesting part of this one is that you have two things happening here. We have the hiss effect where you're not really pronouncing that T at the end of first. It's like first step. You don't really pronounce the T until the word step. First step. A big game, big game. Black cat, black cat. I don't know exactly. So that's something we have two different reductions happening here. One reduction is that we very often do not pronounce the T or the D, and especially when it's in between consonants like this, like an N or an S. Don't, so we have I don't know. But because we're not pronouncing the T at the end of don't, we're blending this don't into the next word, no. I don't know. I don't know. So instead of I don't know, you might hear someone say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And so that's a good thing to practice. I don't know, I don't know, whatever it takes. Yeah, exactly. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Have not whatever it takes. It's whatever it takes. Cup of tea. Okay, this is not the same exactly because we're not repeating a consonant, but this is a really good point that the word of, whenever we have these like really high frequency words like of or the, to, those words, especially when they are not stressed, are going to be reduced. So that's why instead of saying cup of, we say cuppa. Or instead of saying a lot of, we say a lotta, a buncha, a cuppa. Kind of, kinda. Sort of, sorta. So of is a very common word to reduce. In general, like really high frequency words are going to be common to reduce. And especially when you have groups of maybe 2 or 3 words, like a lot of is a really common phrase to use. And that's one that we're not going in English, we don't put the stress on these really high frequency phrases. Instead, we put the stress on the important content words. A good one. Give it to me, or we also have give me becomes gimme. Let me becomes let me. I'm going to post this on my YouTube channel. There was a specific exercise that we did in the workshop that I attended where you listen to an audio and then you need to listen for specific parts of the audio. And I thought it was really good, but there are not that many videos like this. And so I thought of making one myself. So I'm thinking of doing that if I have time this weekend. If I can, I will post it, but I want to make a video you can use to train your reduced speech listening. It's also really common to use reduced speech with questions. People use reduced speech a lot with questions because auxiliary verbs are very often reduced. So when you're listening to someone, you might hear, instead of what did you do, like what'd you, the whole first part is all blended together and then you only hear the main verb. It's like, what'd you do? What'd you do? Where'd you go? Where'd you go? What do you have? So that happens a lot when you're listening to someone. Part of the reason why it's easier for us to pay attention to some words, like the most important verbs, is because those are the ones people are saying in a clearer way compared to other words that they're saying. So that's why it's very common in questions. I've graduated from English language and literature, but still struggling with fluency. Yeah, I think that happens a lot. To be honest, people that are very informed about grammar and know a lot about the written language sometimes struggle with fluency because maybe in the moment of speaking, you have a lot of options or you kind of judge yourself a lot. So I think it's something where sometimes people that are very educated and informed even struggle more with their fluency because they have maybe more pressure or they criticize themselves more. So I think that's something that you have to work on specifically is the confidence when you're speaking. Why I am going to go But thank you everyone for joining the live, and it looks like a lot of people need more practice with connected speech. If you want more practice with connected speech, I have a YouTube video and podcast episode called Connected Speech. Oh, you should check it out, and then if you have any questions, you can leave a comment, and I'm happy to answer them. Have a good weekend, and take care, everyone. Bye.